So, welcome. It is so good to be with all of you today, this afternoon for me here on the East Coast. This is a webinar from Lifelong Learning on cultivating mentoring relationships for faith formation. And this is a collaboration between some different departments here in Lifelong Learning. Building faith and e-formation, we sort of alternate webinars. And today this is more of a building faith focus. And in December, we'll have an e-formation webinar. So thank you for being with all of us at Lifelong Learning. Let's open up with a prayer. So I invite you to settle in, take a deep breath, whatever helps you to be present. The Lord be with you.
So with you.
Let us pray. Direct us, O Lord, in all our doings with your most gracious favor, and further us with your continual help, that in all our works, begun, continued, and ended in you, we may glorify your holy name, and finally, by your mercy, obtain everlasting life. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
So my name is Sarah Bentley Allred, and I will be hosting this webinar today. I'm one of the staff members here at Lifelong Learning, and I work also as the editor of Building Faith as the biggest chunk of my job here at Lifelong Learning. And we have two folks on the back end that you'll see in the chat. Catherine Malloy is running the tech for this webinar, and she'll be kind of the Lifelong Learning. I think she's coming up as Lifelong Learning in the chat. And then one of the students that works with us, Katie, will also be in the chat. So you can reach out to them if you have questions. And we are very excited today to have Carol Pinkham Oak as our panelist. And I'll invite you, Carol, to introduce yourself.
Okay. Well, I'm thrilled to be here with all of you to talk about something that I have seen shape people in their vocations and in their lives very powerfully. So I am an Episcopal priest. I have 30 years of experience in the parish, and of those 30 years, 20 of them have been spent either developing mentoring programs and or mentoring clergy in various stages of their vocations. So I am at BTS as part of a grant called Thriving in Ministry, and we form peer learning communities, train mentors to be part of those peer learning communities, and then provide them the guidance and the support to work through the things that they've identified they need to do to be a better priest and to be a more effective leader. So it is focused on leadership development. However, peer learning communities are wonderful, and we're hoping in the future we'll be forming them around all sorts of different places in the church, lay people, particular lay vocations, leadership vocations. So stay tuned. There may be more about this.
Wonderful. So I'm going to hand it over to Carol for the majority of our presentation. But if you have questions, you can put them in the chat, but we will be most likely to see them if you hit this little Q&A button at the bottom and put your questions in there, and that will help us for our Q&A time. So Carol, over to you.
Okay, great. So I'm going to do three things. I'm going to define mentoring in the most accessible way that I know. There's lots of different definitions of it, but I'm going to give you the way that I've seen has worked. I'm also going to give you a tool for framing conversations. And then we're going to talk some about how this shows up in the parish and how this might impact their ministries, and have plenty of time for questions and answers after that. So the first part, what is mentoring? Mentoring is learning. Mentoring is for conversation. And mentoring is formation, which is the integration of learning and conversations. We take in information from a person. Presumably, this is a person with whom we're engaged in intentional conversation. We generate how that impacts or shows up in our lives. And then we take that learning and that conversation and put it together and say, well, how is that shaping my faith now? What does this mean for me now in my journey with Jesus? So I invite you to think about what experiences you have had about being mentored, or being a mentor for someone else. They can be positive experiences, which we certainly hope for, or they can be negative experiences, things that didn't go so well. Think about that for a moment, and make some notes if you want to, where you're sitting, or reflect. And then think about what made that particular experience a learning experience. And again, it can be a negative experience and still be a learning experience, but your experience of either being mentored or being a mentor, and then what made that experience a learning experience. We'll just take a minute or two to think about that.
So we invite you to put those thoughts that you have in the chat, and we'll give you a minute. And maybe, Carol, would it be okay if I read some of those out loud?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I was thinking about the importance of trust. I think I've learned more from the mentors I've really trusted.
Mm-hmm. That's definitely true.
Catherine said, I learn a lot when I'm in the role of mentor, especially being a confirmation mentor. Francis said, I learn more from a mentor who accepts me for who I am. Mm-hmm. We all feel free to keep thinking on that one. Though more, Rich says, one who cares about formation more than information. I think Carol is going to touch on.
Yes, we're going to touch on that later. Absolutely. So
thank you guys.
Yeah, so keep adding them, but we can go on to the next part of this. So you ready to move the slide, Sarah? Here you go. Okay. So mentoring is for learning. That to me is the most important part. If learning is not taking place, then it's not mentoring. You can have a casual conversation. You can be talking to somebody about something very significant, but unless you're in a conversation that you're not only talking, but actively reflecting with the other person about the meaning of that, that's mentoring, that's learning. Lovely conversations are not necessarily mentoring. So learning are those reflections. Somebody just said in the chat, mentees ask great questions. That's part of learning. Their stories, either the mentee story or appropriately shared part of your story. Their wonderings about the experience of faith and the world to which we are called to live in. So mentoring has an outer and an inner part for both the mentor and the mentee. So it's building our faith, it's experience our faith, it's coming to know our faith more deeply, but it's also coming to know how we are bringing that faith to the places that we interact with the world. So both the mentor and the mentee learn from one another. You may have heard about the mentoring method where you pour the information in. This is not about that, not about pouring content in, and we'll touch on that later. So mentoring is for conversation. Conversation builds relationship. So again, we can have casual conversations and say, oh, that was a nice person to chat with. But a mentoring conversation is one that enhances or builds the relationship. So if a relationship is not being enhanced by the conversation, then the conversation is not mentoring and it's not contributing to the building of faith. Conversation, the kind of conversation that builds within us and with the person with whom we're speaking, has 4 pillars, let's say. And I take these from Fierce Conversations by Susan Scott. She has published a book and many other materials on this that you can look up and hopefully go deeper into. But a conversation that enhances a relationship interrogates reality, the world as the mentor and the mentee see it. So it's not a general, oh, aren't things horrible today? It's where are we in our place? How are we experiencing the world now? How are we experiencing on our belief being lived now? So conversation interrogates reality. Conversation also provokes learning. And I think you can see that if you're reflecting, you're questioning, you're looking at your life in the world, you are going to be learning. You're going to be seeing new insights or new perspectives. A conversation tackles tough challenges and questions. I don't know about you, but I've been in conversations where I felt like what we really needed to be talking about was kind of in the middle between us and no one was really bringing it up. So particularly a mentoring conversation is, I'm wondering, I'm getting the feeling that maybe we should be talking about your sense of feeling lost, which you've brought up 3 times. Is that really what's, bothering you now? Or is that really where your focus is? So it can be a tough challenge, but it will tackle those. It just won't put them aside, because tackling tough challenges helps your mentoring conversation, the conversation go deeper. So interrogate reality, provoke learning, tackle tough challenges. And we only have 3 pillars there. Oh, enhances the relationship. We said that at the beginning. So those are the 4 pillars. So mentoring is for formation. You have a learning conversation, you have a conversation that enhances the relationship, and you bring together your shared insights, discoveries, your affirmations, your questions, and you ask, what do I believe now? Has anything changed? Has anything stayed the same? What shifted? What do I see more expansively now? So what you're doing is bringing together that relationship and the learning and integrating them together for formation. Okay. Here is some attributes of what a mentoring relationship is. And it repeats a little bit of what we've just said. But when people say to you, well, I don't think I can be a mentor, or I don't know what mentors do, here are some things that you can say. A mentor and a mentee learn new perspectives. That mutuality and safety, a safe environment to explore. So there's a mutual sense. You're not taking content and pouring it into somebody else's head. We had in the chat, a mentor is someone who accepts me as I am. Yep, that's exactly it. And the confidentiality goes both ways. Not only is the mentor keeping confidential what the mentee describes or says, but the mentee is doing that as well. You are trusting one another. A mentoring relationship also focuses on the well-being of a mentee. So let's say you're talking to an adult leader and they say, oh, I could never do this. And yet, they're the type of person in their faith life that they're always trying to make other people's lives better. You can say, well, I observe this in you. And that's really what mentoring is. You are doing this for the benefit of the other person. So those are some attributes of a mentoring relationship to help you talk with others. And here are some particular things about adults and youth. So adults learn by experience through having a concrete experience, reflecting on that experience, taking an abstract conceptualization of what could be different, and then trying that abstract conceptualization out. That creates a new concrete experience, that creates new reflection, and you go around in a circle. Youth are emerging adult leaders. which means they can engage in all these different aspects of learning from experience, but they'll do so at different levels at different times. One day they may be very good at describing their concrete experience. One day you'll be surprised on what an abstract idea they're coming up with, but they won't go through it in the same boxes that an adult goes. It'll be less even, and that just means you're listening. Okay, next one, Sarah. So here's a tool for a mentoring conversation. It's hopefully an easy acronym for you to remember. It's LEAP, L-E-A-P, and it stands for listen, empathize, agree, and then partner. So someone says, oh, well, how do you have a mentoring conversation? You can say, well, I've got a very shorthand way for you to think about this. And you can say, listen, empathize, agree, partner. And we're going to build those out. So Sarah, listening is your being present. I don't have to say this, but being present is not looking at your phone, not looking over the person's shoulder, that the person you're talking to really feels that they're there for their benefit. Listening is about wondering. You're staying curious. You're not making judgments about what the person is saying exactly at this point. It can be something that sounds completely out of whack, but this is not the point where you're talking about what is that right and what is wrong. You're just accepting what they're saying. There'll be a time later to talk about what is possible and what is not possible. But if you're talking about what is right and what is wrong, that erodes the relationship. You're already told the person you're not there for them. You're there to tell them what you think. So at this stage, it's not about right and wrong. It's about the relationship. So be present, wonder, not about right and wrong, and it's about the relationship. Empathize is you're noticing the feelings. If the person is agitated or calm or lots of energy or angry or sad or just so joyous that they can't keep anything in, that's perfectly appropriate to notice. And I'm sure you all have done this in your ministries, to name feelings. If an event is frightening, to recognize that might have been really frightening, or I guess that was really frightening. If you're not sure what the person's getting at, you sound like you are feeling lonely, feeling happy, wondering if you can be happy about this. So you're helping the mentee bring forward what they've said in words, but they may not have encapsulated in one feeling word. And the mentee's feelings do not have to be your feelings. You may have strong feelings about what the mentee is feeling, but you don't have to say that these feelings are your feelings, but just recognize what their feelings. Okay, so that's empathize. Agree. You can agree upon what you can agree on. So you've heard what's going on with them, you've recognized what they're feeling, you're starting to hear what's important to them. And for example, this person is saying that they want to go and bring a homeless person home, and that would be a real test of what his family thinks. And you can agree upon that a homeless person really needs help and shelter and someone to be a bridge to get them from homelessness to a shelter. Surprising your parents with this person may not be the right thing to do. So you can agree upon what is an action that can be taken, but you don't need to agree on every exact step or behavior that the youth is proposing. So I hope that makes it's shared values. It doesn't have to be shared actions. So that's agree. Now partners. Okay. You partner to achieve the results that the mentee would like to reach. So here's an example. Mentee's trying to find a way to become more independent. That's something you can partner with. What are some of the ways in which I can help you as the mentor do that? Oh, well, will you help me leave home because I just think I need a night away. Well, I can't partner with helping you leave home and not telling your parents, but I can partner with you about finding a way that maybe you can go do something where you feel independent, and it will build your confidence. So you can partner to get to the results, again, without agreeing completely with what's being suggested, but still achieving what the mentee wants to do. The other way you partner is in stories about faith. You can say to somebody, I wonder where this comes up in scripture. At our last gathering, we had a song that had lyrics. Or what do you feel when you're out in nature? If you want that expansive sense of being part of God's creative universe, how about going for a hike? Those are just all scattered examples of how you can partner in stories about faith. Okay. So this is the part where we're going to talk about some very specifics about mentoring with youth. Safety and confidentiality is essential, and that goes both ways. Recognizing that they will be on a range of conversation that could be in the moment to conversation that might lead to a long-term relationship. So they will have a wider spectrum usually than an adult would have in a mentoring relationship, but that's okay. They're experiencing a lot of different parts of life as new and testing, and just recognize that's going to be a wide spectrum. They often need support to frame questions. So trying something out and see if that's really what they're asking, or giving 3, is it this, is it this, is it this? Again, I'm sure many of you have had a situation where you've had to work with somebody to help them really say, oh yeah, that's what I'm talking about. The content is your conversation. So you're not teaching content. When you wonder about a Bible story, you're not wondering about it so that you can get them to see what you think is the moral of the story. The content is your conversation with that person and how you're both wondering where that story leads. I've said this before, but the mentor listens. The mentor needs to know when it's appropriate to share a personal story. And the mentor themselves has a challenge to be aware and conversant in his or her own faith story. So if you're going to be talking with youth about what might be their experience of faith at that moment or last week, or you have to be aware of your own faith story and be ready to talk about that. If you're holding back or unsure, just like anybody else, the youth will sense that. The next slide, Sarah. Okay, so that challenge is what brings me to mentoring and the adult leader. Mentoring in the parish for formation is formative for the adult leader. Not only is it for the benefit of the mentee, it's for the benefit of the adult leader. Collaboration among leaders is essential. This is never just a one adult on one adult. It's usually a group of leaders who are mentoring various youth or bringing other people into that circle of adult leaders in order to mentor other people. It needs reflecting, planning, discerning. What is the learning for the youth? And you're drawing on the actual experiences that are going on in your neighborhood or your parish or your school at that time. To get comfortable with telling your own faith story, you're sharing with other adults your faith story and your life story. There's some practice involved in that. There's some practice about discussing what is challenging. Or, I'm really worried that this is going to come up. That's what you discuss with your adult leaders. Or I had this conversation and I really didn't know what to say. So I told them I'd get back to them. And then you go back to your adult leaders. You say, what can we do next time? And finally, questions. Your other adult leaders are going through the same thing that you are, same experiences, same sense of wanting to have these building faith conversations with the mentees. And they're your place to have questions and learn from their experience. So most typically, mentoring for formation comes forward in confirmation. That's where I've heard it most often used. And I encourage, if there's going to be a mentoring component, to look at it as a journey or a pilgrimage, because you want to be able to say, this is a conversation over a long period of time. Mentoring also comes up in transitions. So a transition is a response to a change event on how we adapt to that emotionally, physically, spiritually. So it could be an event in the life of the youth, or it could be an event in the life of your youth community. It could be an event in the life of their school. But there has been a change event, and you're talking about the transition of how do you adapt to that. These are all ways in which mentoring can show up and be used in parish conversations, in your conversations with youth, in your conversations with your adult leaders. But I would also encourage you to think about what are some of the ways we can imagine using mentoring that we haven't done before. And I would guess that you'll come up with ways that are not only very creative, but really ignite something within your parish or your group that you're working with, because you know them so well and you know what they are working on. So always ask yourself the question, what ways are we imagining using mentoring that we're not using now? Okay.
Let's go back one more slide and see if anybody has a different way that mentoring is happening in their context to put in the chat.
Great.
And we will definitely be sending out the slides and the recording. So don't worry about that. But Catherine was sharing that the confirmation program had a small group of parents and mentors, and that was really helpful for some folks. So some parents, and I think there's a lot of other ways that there could be parent mentoring happening, parents of older, young people, and parents of small children is an idea. Also, I think if you are a clergy person or a lay person who is in charge, for example, of a youth or children's program, you're informally mentoring some of those leaders, and perhaps there could be some more formal mentoring. I love your LEAP acronym. So there could be maybe some more formal mentoring of adult leaders in the congregation. Any other ways you can imagine or are already using mentoring? Maybe this sparked some ideas for folks. It also sparks my imagination about like vestry folks, somebody who's been on the vestry or a board or something of the church for 3 years, or this is their second time mentoring somebody who's brand new to that leadership group.
And Rich Nelson just put in the chat about peer mentoring. That's another wonderful way to make the conversation very, very learning intense, because you're sharing the same experiences.
Yeah. And empty nesters with younger parents. So
yeah,
lots of possibilities. Vestry mentoring. Informal mentoring for new members with longtime members, wondering about making that more intentional. It's a great idea.
Yep.
Yeah. So what other questions? We have about 15 minutes for questions, and Carol is happy to answer answer your questions. So let us know either in the chat or in the Q&A. What questions do you have? What has this sparked for you? One thing I was thinking about, Carol, is could you give us your 30-second elevator pitch? If I was going to approach somebody at my parish, we'll just pretend it was, I needed a confirmation mentor and I caught them at coffee hour and I wanted to give them my 30-second pitch. What would your 30-second pitch be?
I would say, I've watched you and we've had a couple of conversations and I can tell you're a really good listener. And I'm wondering if you would come into a ministry with youth where we listen and we learn about faith together, and they'll learn from you, but you'll also learn from them. Are you interested in joining me? That's
Perfect. I love it.
Yeah.
All right, we have a couple of other questions. Ideas for training adults to mentor youth at church. So how would you equip and prepare adults to do this work with youth?
Well, first of all, I would get them comfortable with that they can do this, right? That they can do this. They don't have to have a vast biblical knowledge, and because it's not the content being poured in. If they have a heart to have a relationship with a youth person and they're willing to listen and go with the conversation, then you can give them the parameters that are in these slides about what is mentoring, what needs to happen in the relationship, the safety, the confidentiality for the benefit of the youth person. Give them some boundaries, parameters, you can shape it for them. And then try out some conversations that follow the LEAP pattern. I'll tell you that I first learned this pattern with people who had severe brain diseases. So what they said was not following in a sequence. And even though what the person is saying is not following in a sequence, with this method, they can still tell that you're listening to them and you care about them. And it's about the relationship. So I would put them through some of that practice with the LEAP. And then I would give them space to try it and come back. I would realize that your adults are in the concrete experience, reflection, abstract concept, testing. And think of that as the way in which you're working with the adults, and use the specifics of mentoring to go through that circle.
I love that, because so often we set someone off on a course and we don't have I can speak for myself. So often I don't have great follow-up with, let's come back together and reflect upon that. So, Okay, we have some other great questions here. So Joel is wondering what the actual conversation looks like. So I did hear you say there isn't a curriculum or a specific content, but when you're encouraging people to say, after church, we're going to have confirmation mentors and mentee time. You can go somewhere in the church with the door open, safe church, etc., or out in the lawn and have a conversation. Right. What do you give conversation starters? Do people have to come up with on their own? What's the content there?
No, I think you do. Well, first of all, you've told the youth these are the parameters of the conversation, and you can say start off. It's okay to start off talking about what your day was like, or what you did yesterday. We want you to be able to know what's going on in one another's lives, but then you're going to move to one of these 3 question prompts, and you pick which one you want to use, and let the conversation flow from there. I think it's also fair to give the adults some other questions to ask if they get stuck or they feel like it's slowing down. But if they're going to be talking an hour, what's important to you today, or what's important over this weekend to you, let's pick a question prompt, and let's see where we can go with that, relate it back to scripture. Even if you're getting brief answers, that would be a half an hour, and your group, so how long you're going to talk or not talk approximately. or you give them a short amount of time the first time, and if they go over, you give them a longer time the next time.
I love that experimenting.
Yeah.
So here's another one about how we can mentor youth well in the age of COVID-19.
I think that speaks to that they're variously on the spectrum of the conversation. So chances are it's going to be more, and this is my perspective from parish ministry. You all know this on the ground. But chances are it's going to be more in the moment conversation. It may be a little bit more of the mentor saying, you know what, we are going to set a time, even if it's 10 minutes for us to check in. The mentor may need to put a little bit more structure around it, because we all know when we're feeling anxious or uncertain, we tend to have lots of different thoughts that we want to attend to, and we can't focus down. So to help the youth focus.
And in terms of sort of maintaining the lowest risk possible in COVID-19, have you seen this work well over Zoom? Is it not going to work over Zoom? What is your thoughts on that? Does it need to be in person?
With adults, I have done extensive mentoring over Zoom. Students are so sick of Zoom. I know. If you are in an area where you can meet safely with masks or 6 feet apart or someplace that is well ventilated, I would give them a different experience than what they've been experiencing in school and feeling tired of. And even the adults that I've worked with, they're at this stage of, I can't wait to meet the other person in my group, or I can't wait to meet the mentor face to face, because we haven't had a live interaction yet.
Yeah. So one in the Q&A box about how we manage pairing the youth and concerns about child protection policies. And that, Carol, you can jump in, but I don't know how recently you have worked with those safe church policies. So I can also give some guidance.
Well, I can tell you that as an ordained person, we're required to recertify ourselves every 5 years. So I've read the most recent and taken the training for the most recent safe church. And if you're meaning the safety for the mentee in terms of physical space, and I'm sorry, that's my dog who's starting to, if you're talking about physical space, it really applies. It has to be with the door open. It has to be where there's other people present. It has to, obviously in COVID, it has to be with masks on. You as the adult, if you feel like the conversation is not appropriate, you can stop it. That's appropriate to say, you know what, we're going into territory now that this isn't really. Keeping the confidentiality, unless the person is seriously or even alluding to harming themselves or harming somebody else.
Right.
And that may come out of my training with people with brain diseases, but I think we just don't know with youth. And if it comes up in a moment, thank you, Kat, Lifelong Learning for. So is that answering the question, Sarah?
I think so. I would also add to that. I have, I have worked with youth in a congregation, and I'm wondering if it might be appropriate to say, here's who I'm thinking about pairing with you as your confirmation mentor. And does that feel like a comfortable fit with you? You could just ask the youth, do you know this person? Does that feel like a comfortable fit?
Yeah.
So that, and I think if you were pairing adults, that might be reasonable too, to just kind of, to say that, and it would, depending on the congregation size, will also make a difference, because people may or may
Right.
not know each other well.
Right. Right.
But I also think doing a couple of sessions where you're in the church building, in the sanctuary or the parish hall, pull up 2 chairs kind of thing, but everybody is nearby.
Oh, everybody's in it. Yep.
Might make folks feel comfortable. So if that did not answer your question, I'm sorry, I forget who asked that. Please reiterate so we can,
let us know. Yeah.
Let us know. Any other questions before we share a little follow-up? I'm going to put these, make sure those links are in the chat. All right, I think we can go to the next slide then. So we wanted to let you know about 2 upcoming opportunities. One is that we have open office hours through Lifelong Learning every Thursday afternoon for an hour and a half, starting at 1 p.m. Eastern time. And we're off next week for Thanksgiving. But the following Thursday on December 2nd, Carol will be joining us. So if you would like to come and talk about a specific contextual question in your own context, please sign up for those open office hours. Maybe Catherine could drop a link in the chat and come talk to us more about mentoring. We would love to follow up. You'll have the slides so you can think a little more about it and then come on and follow up. And then we are going to have a Lent planning workshop on Tuesday, November 30th. I know that folks are just thinking about Advent, but this will be recorded and offered in an asynchronous form later. So you can wait until that comes out, or you can come live and get the juices flowing for Lent 2022. We have lots going on, and you can sign up for our newsletters to be up to date and check out our Eventbrite. And there's some links going into the chat. I think we have one more slide. So thank you so much for spending the time with us this afternoon. Huge thanks to Carol for sharing about mentoring. And I think that LEAP way of talking, way of conversing will be applicable in many circumstances. All right, I think that's all for today. Thank you so much. And please email us if you have feedback. We appreciate you being here.